The sun hung low in the sky, casting a soft golden hue over the bustling streets of the city. The rich, tall buildings seemed to pierce the clouds, their sharp edges catching the last rays of the day. In the midst of this concrete jungle, a place where the wealthiest of the wealthy walked past the less fortunate with barely a glance, there was a small park tucked away at the corner of an alley. It was a place often overlooked by the well-dressed crowd, but it was here that the most unexpected meeting was about to take place. Her name was Olivia Langston, a name synonymous with power, wealth, and influence. At 42, she was one of the youngest self-made billionaires in the country. A visionary in the tech world, she had built an empire from the ground up, amassing fortunes that most could only dream of. Her sleek black limousine had just pulled up near the park, the driver stepping out to open the door for her. Olivia stepped out, her high heels clicking sharply against the pavement as she made her way to a nearby bench. She had a few hours to herself, a rare luxury in her otherwise chaotic schedule. She sat, taking a deep breath and letting the serenity of the park wash over her. It was a stark contrast to her usual surroundings: marble floors, private jets, and boardrooms where decisions worth millions were made in minutes. Here, the only sounds were the chirping of birds and the occasional rustle of leaves as a gentle breeze blew through the trees. It felt calm, peaceful. But even in this moment of tranquility, her mind raced. There were always deals to be done, numbers to crunch, and strategies to create. A loud noise broke her concentration. It was a faint sound at first, but it grew louder. A man, no older than 35, with disheveled hair and worn-out clothes, was pushing a battered stroller toward the bench she was sitting on. He appeared exhausted, beads of sweat dripping down his face as he maneuvered the stroller over the uneven sidewalk. But it wasn't the man's condition that caught her attention. It was the child in the stroller. The boy was no more than 7 or 8 years old. His skin was pale, his body frail, and his eyes seemed to carry a depth of sadness that Olivia couldn't understand. His legs were twisted in a way that made it clear he couldn't move them, and his arms hung limp at his sides. Yet, despite his condition, there was a faint smile on his face as he looked up at his father, his eyes full of love and admiration. The father didn't seem to notice Olivia's gaze. He was focused entirely on his son. The man reached the bench where Olivia was sitting and stopped, breathing heavily. He adjusted the stroller, ensuring his son was comfortable. Then he sat on the grass beside the bench, glancing at Olivia for the first time. There was a moment of silence before he spoke, his voice low but steady. "Do you mind if we sit here?" he asked, his words tinged with an accent that Olivia couldn't quite place. Olivia looked at the man, then at the boy in the stroller. For a moment, she considered telling him to move along. After all, she was a billionaire, and she didn't need to interact with people like him. But something in his eyes stopped her. There was a quiet dignity about him, despite the ragged clothes and obvious hardships. "No," she said, surprising herself. "You can stay." The man nodded gratefully, but he didn't say anything else. Instead, he turned his attention to his son, pulling out a small container from his bag. He began to feed the boy, carefully spooning food into his mouth with a tenderness that was palpable. Olivia watched them, her curiosity growing. Who was this man? How did he end up in such a dire situation? The scene before her was so starkly different from her own life, where meals were served on silver platters, and the people around her had everything they could ever want. She didn't have to worry about the struggles of everyday life. Her world was made of luxury, and every need was met before it even arose. As the father fed his son, Olivia felt a pang of something unfamiliar. Guilt? Sympathy? She wasn't sure. But the boy's frail form and the love in his father's eyes were enough to make her question her own existence. She had everything, and yet here was a man with so little, giving everything to care for his child. She cleared her throat, unsure of what to say. "How long has he been like this?" she asked, the words slipping out before she could stop them. The man looked up, surprised by the question. His eyes softened, and he wiped a hand across his face, as though trying to hide the exhaustion that seemed to weigh on him. "A few years now," he replied quietly. "He was born with a condition, something the doctors can't explain." They say he'll never walk, never talk, never do much of anything on his own. He paused, his gaze flickering to his son. But he's still my boy. He still has a spirit. And that's all I need. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. His words, the sincerity in his voice, hit her harder than she expected. Here was a man who had nothing, yet he spoke as though he had everything in the world. His son, in his eyes, was a treasure. The man went on to explain that he worked odd jobs, anything he could find, to support them both. But it was never enough. The medical bills, the constant care his son required, and the lack of opportunities weighed on him every day. Yet, he kept going because he had to. I don't ask for much, he said with a small, weary smile. I just want him to have a chance at life. A chance to experience the world, even if it's from this stroller. Olivia sat in stunned silence, her mind racing. She couldn't imagine the weight of his life, the constant struggle. And yet, here he was, still holding on, still fighting for his son. She glanced at the boy again, wondering what he dreamed of. Did he wish he could run and play like the other children? Did he dream of a world outside his broken body? Her thoughts were interrupted when the boy suddenly looked up at her, his eyes meeting hers for the first time. There was something in his gaze, a quiet intensity, as if he knew exactly who she was. Olivia felt an odd sense of connection in that moment, as though the boy could see through the layers of wealth and success that had built walls around her heart. He reached out a small, shaky hand, trying to grasp her fingers. His father noticed and gently placed his hand over the boy's, guiding it toward Olivia. She hesitated for a moment, her world of opulence and privilege clashing with the raw, unfiltered reality before her. But then, as if drawn by an invisible force, Olivia reached out and took the boy's hand. For a brief moment, the world seemed to stand still. There, in the quiet of the park, Olivia felt something she hadn't in years, something real. Something untainted by money, status, or power. Thank you, the man said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. He doesn't get many visitors. But he's always had a sense about people. He must have sensed something in you. Olivia swallowed hard, trying to push down the emotions welling up inside her. She had lived her life as a businesswoman, making cold, calculated decisions. She prided herself on being immune to sentiment. Yet, here she was, completely caught off guard by a man with nothing but love and a sick child to offer. She began, but her voice faltered. I'm sorry. I don't know what to say. The man gave a soft chuckle. There's nothing to say. We all have our battles to fight. But I've learned that kindness can sometimes be enough, even if it's just a little bit. Olivia nodded, still unsure of what she was feeling. She wasn't used to this kind of encounter, human connection that wasn't tied to money or influence. She thought she understood people, but this was different. There was a rawness here that left her feeling exposed, vulnerable in a way she had never allowed herself to be. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the park, Olivia stood up. Her mind was spinning with thoughts, questions, and emotions that didn't quite fit together. I need to go, she said finally, her voice low. The man nodded, as though he had expected this. Take care of yourself, he said softly. And don't forget about the people who don't have what you do. They're still out here every day. Olivia turned and walked away, her footsteps slow and heavy. As she passed the limousine, she looked back one last time at the father and son, sitting on the bench in the fading light. She knew her life would never be the same again. What happened next was something she couldn't have predicted. And as the days went on, Olivia found herself questioning everything. Her success, her choices, and the people she had left behind. But in the back of her mind, there was one thought that refused to leave her. What if there was more she could do for them? What if this was the beginning of a change she never saw coming? And so, Olivia's journey had only just begun. Olivia had never been one to make impulsive decisions. Her life was a carefully curated balance of strategy, power, and control. Every action she took, every business move she made was deliberate. There was no room for emotional entanglements, no place for sentimentality. She had built her empire on the foundation of rationality, focusing solely on outcomes, bottom lines, and efficiency. Yet, as she sat in the back of her limousine that evening, her thoughts swirling with images of the father and son in the park, she couldn't escape the feeling that something had shifted within her. Something profound and unanticipated. She looked out of the tinted windows at the city speeding by, but the streets felt foreign, disconnected from the world she had always known. How could a man with so little still carry so much love, so much strength? And the boy with his quiet eyes, full of wisdom beyond his years. She couldn't shake the sense that the encounter had not just been a random moment of charity or coincidence, but that it was a call to something deeper, a call that she had never heeded before. The next day, Olivia tried to focus on her usual routine. There was an important meeting scheduled with her senior executives, a new partnership to be sealed with one of the world's most influential tech giants. The numbers had been meticulously arranged, the terms and conditions negotiated for months, and yet, all she could think about was the park. As she stood in the sleek, glass conference room surrounded by her colleagues, listening to the latest projections and developments, her mind wandered. She wasn't truly listening to the conversation. Her thoughts were consumed by the faces of the father and son, the quiet moments between them. "Olivia," a voice broke her out of her reverie. "Olivia, what are your thoughts on this?" She blinked and looked around the table, realizing that everyone was staring at her. Her mind scrambled to catch up, to pretend like nothing was amiss. Her eyes briefly flicked to her phone, which buzzed with the name of an investor she had been working with for months. But her heart wasn't in it. It wasn't the deal she wanted to focus on. It was the boy in the stroller. His face lingered in her mind like a haunting memory, a reflection of a life she had long ignored. The man had seemed like a stranger, yet his words resonated with her in ways she couldn't explain. She excused herself from the meeting early, offering a quick, half-hearted explanation about needing to attend to an urgent matter. The ride back to her penthouse was even more tense. She couldn't quite shake the feeling that her world, this well-oiled machine of wealth and influence she had worked tirelessly to create, was suddenly crumbling. It wasn't a physical collapse. No, her empire was as strong as ever, but the foundation of her life, the very essence of her existence, was shifting. She had always thought of herself as someone above the common struggles of the everyday person, someone who had transcended the mundane aspects of life. But the man in the park had made her realize something she couldn't ignore. No matter how high she climbed, no matter how much she amassed, she would never be truly fulfilled as long as she remained disconnected from the world around her. That evening, after a long day of self-reflection, Olivia made a decision. She didn't know what it would mean for her, or for the future she had so carefully planned. But she couldn't continue down this path of detachment. The boy in the stroller had opened her eyes to a truth she couldn't ignore. She needed to do something to make a real impact, something tangible. She had been a player in the world of business for so long that she had lost sight of the human side of her work. The following week, Olivia returned to the park. She didn't come in her limousine this time. Instead, she walked on foot, dressed casually in jeans and a simple t-shirt, her hair pulled back into a loose ponytail. There was no entourage this time, no security detail, just Olivia, alone and vulnerable in a way that felt strange to her. The park was as quiet as she remembered, but there was no sign of the father and son. She wandered for a while, sitting on the same bench where they had once shared their quiet moments, her heart heavy with the uncertainty of her actions. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she had unfinished business. Days passed, and Olivia returned to the park every afternoon. She would sit quietly, observing the children playing, the elderly couples taking their walks, and the homeless people who had nowhere else to go. There was a deep sense of sadness in the park, but also a kind of unspoken strength, a resilience she had never noticed before. Yet, still, the father and son never returned. She had no idea where they lived, or even their names. It was as if they had simply disappeared from her life, leaving only the memories of a brief encounter that had somehow changed her. Weeks later, on an overcast afternoon, Olivia's patience was rewarded. She arrived early, hoping to catch a glimpse of them, but the park was nearly empty. As she settled onto the bench, about to leave once more, she noticed a figure in the distance. A familiar figure pushing a stroller toward the same spot where they had met. Her heart skipped a beat. She stood up, her breath catching in her throat as she watched the man approach. He didn't notice her at first, but when he finally looked up, his tired eyes met hers, and a faint smile crossed his face. "You came back," he said softly, his voice still warm but now with a hint of surprise. Olivia swallowed hard, unsure of what to say. I had to. I couldn't stop thinking about you and your son." The man nodded, pushing the stroller closer to the bench. "His name is Ethan," he said, gesturing toward the boy, who was now awake and looking up at Olivia with a smile that seemed out of place for someone who had been through so much. "And I'm Ben." Ben sat down on the grass beside the stroller, his attention focused on Ethan. Olivia felt a deep sense of connection with both of them in that moment. The awkwardness she had felt before melted away as she took a seat beside them. "I want to help," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of excitement and fear. "I don't know what I can do, but I want to make a difference for you, for Ethan. Please, let me help." Ben looked at her, his expression unreadable. For a moment, he said nothing, merely watching her closely, as if gauging her sincerity. Then, after what seemed like an eternity, he spoke. "I don't need money," he said quietly, shaking his head. "I don't want charity. Ethan and I were okay. We get by." "But it's not about charity," Olivia insisted. "I want to do something that can actually help. You're not alone in this. I know that I have the resources, the influence. I can create a foundation, provide the medical care and support that you need. We can build something that can change your life and the lives of others like you." Ben remained silent, looking down at Ethan, who had begun to squirm in his stroller. The boy reached out toward Olivia, his small hand stretching toward her, as if inviting her into their world. Olivia felt a lump form in her throat. She didn't have the words to explain it, but she understood in that moment that this was not about fixing their lives, not about doing something grand or extravagant. It was about simply showing up, being present, and doing something real. "I know you're doing your best," Olivia continued softly, "but you don't have to do it alone. You've already shown me that love and care are more powerful than anything money can buy. But that doesn't mean you should have to sacrifice everything just to survive. Let me help." Ben finally met her gaze. There was a pause, a long, quiet moment where Olivia wasn't sure what he would say. Then slowly he nodded. "All right," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But only if you truly mean it. We're not looking for a handout, Olivia. We just need a real chance." And in that moment, Olivia realized that this was her chance, not just to give back, but to truly change the world in a way she had never imagined. It wasn't about the wealth, the empire, or the influence. It was about creating something that lasted, something that could lift others up and make a real difference. And so, Olivia Langston's journey took a new direction. The father and son, who had shown her a different side of life, had led her to a purpose beyond herself. As the days passed, she worked tirelessly to establish a foundation in Ethan's name, one that provided medical care, education, and support for families like Ben and Ethan's. It was a venture that would challenge her, push her outside of her comfort zone, and force her to confront the very things she had avoided for years. But Olivia knew one thing for sure. This was the beginning of something much larger than herself, and she was ready for it. Months passed, and the foundation Olivia had poured her heart and soul into began to take shape. What had once seemed like a spontaneous decision driven by emotion was now a well-established organization with a growing number of supporters. The Ethan Foundation, as it came to be called, was dedicated to improving the lives of children with disabilities and providing financial support for families struggling to make ends meet. It wasn't just about charity, it was about empowerment, about giving people the tools they needed to rebuild their lives on their own terms. The impact of the foundation was already being felt in the lives of countless families, and Olivia had never felt a greater sense of fulfillment. But despite the success of the foundation, Olivia still found herself restless. She threw herself into the work, attending every meeting, every fundraiser, and every event, determined to make a difference. Her days were consumed with spreadsheets, discussions about funding, and collaborations with medical professionals. But even in the midst of it all, she couldn't escape the nagging feeling that something was still missing. There was a void inside of her that the foundation's success couldn't fill. No matter how much good she did in the world, she still felt disconnected, isolated. She had thought that helping others would somehow help her find peace, but the truth was she was still running from something, a part of herself that she had buried deep beneath the surface. It wasn't until she saw Ben and Ethan again that she realized what she had been missing. They hadn't just been the catalyst for her journey into philanthropy. They had become her mirror, reflecting back to her the things she had long ignored. It was during a casual lunch meeting in a small cafe that Olivia found herself sitting across from Ben once more. "How's Ethan doing?" Olivia asked, her voice warm but tinged with concern. She had seen pictures of Ethan, now 5 years old, growing stronger with each passing month. His condition, though still requiring constant care, had improved significantly thanks to the medical treatments and therapies funded by the foundation. But there was something different about Ben. He seemed quieter, more withdrawn than the last time they had met. Ben's eyes were distant as he stirred his coffee, a faraway look in his gaze. "He's doing well," he said, his voice soft. "But I can't help feeling like I'm failing him." Olivia's heart ached at the words. She had never seen Ben like this before. He had always been strong, a quiet pillar of resilience, but now he seemed fragile. The weight of responsibility, of raising a disabled child on his own, was taking its toll. Olivia leaned forward, her hand instinctively reaching across the table. "You're not failing him, Ben," she said firmly, her voice filled with sincerity. "You've given him everything you have. You've fought for him, and you're doing the best you can. That's all anyone can ask for." Ben's eyes met hers, and for a moment, Olivia saw a flicker of vulnerability. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. Every day feels like I'm running on empty, just trying to keep him happy and healthy. And I'm scared, Olivia. I'm scared of what will happen if I can't keep going." The words hung heavy in the air, a confession Olivia hadn't expected. She had always seen Ben as this unshakable force, someone who could handle anything life threw at him. But now she realized that beneath the surface, he was just as human as anyone else, struggling to find his way in a world that didn't always make sense. Olivia felt a deep sense of compassion for him, a desire to help him in a way that went beyond financial support. She had given him money, resources, and a platform, but she hadn't given him the one thing he truly needed, the chance to rest, to heal, to find his own sense of peace. "Ben," she said, her voice softening, "I can't make all the pain go away, but I can help you take a step back. You've given so much of yourself to Ethan, but you need to take care of yourself, too. You can't pour from an empty cup." He looked at her, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, neither of them spoke, the weight of the conversation settling between them. Finally, Ben exhaled a heavy breath. "I don't know how to do that," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to let go of this burden I've been carrying for so long." Olivia nodded, understanding. Maybe it's not about letting go of the burden. Maybe it's about finding a way to share it, to lean on others when you need to. You don't have to do this alone, Ben. You have people who care about you, people who want to see you succeed. And I'm one of those people. I want to help you find a way to heal, to give you the space to breathe again. Ben didn't say anything right away, but Olivia could see the conflict in his eyes. He was a man who had always prided himself on being self-sufficient, who had built a life around protecting his son and making sure that Ethan was never without. But now he was faced with the reality that he couldn't do it all alone. "I'll think about it," Ben finally said, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "I just don't know if I'm ready to ask for help." "You don't have to ask," Olivia replied gently. "Let me offer it then. Let me help you carry the load, Ben. You deserve to rest. You deserve a life that isn't just about survival." The conversation lingered in the back of Olivia's mind long after they parted ways. She had done what she could to help Ben, but she knew that this was a bigger issue, one that reached far beyond their friendship, far beyond her foundation. The world they lived in was not designed for people like Ben and Ethan, people who fought every day just to survive. And yet, there was so much potential, so much hope in those moments of quiet strength. Olivia couldn't change everything, but she could change the trajectory of Ben and Ethan's lives. She had the power to create a system that offered not just financial support, but emotional and physical respite. She could build something that gave people like Ben the opportunity to step back, to recharge, and to return to their lives with renewed strength and purpose. And in doing so, she could offer them the chance to break free from the cycle of constant struggle. The next few weeks saw Olivia diving headfirst into a new project, one that would complement the work of the Ethan Foundation. It was a rehabilitation center designed specifically for parents of children with disabilities, a safe space where they could rest, recover, and find support. The center would offer everything from therapy to childcare to respite programs, and it would be available free of charge to those who needed it most. Olivia wasn't just offering charity. She was offering a new way of life, a chance for people to rebuild their lives from the inside out. Ben was hesitant at first, not quite understanding how this new project could help him. But as the center began to take shape, he started to see the value in it. Slowly, he began to take part in the programs, allowing himself the space to rest, to process, and to heal. It was not an easy transition, and there were moments of doubt and fear, but over time, he began to see the benefits. The day Ben came to Olivia to thank her was one she would never forget. They stood in the lobby of the new center, surrounded by parents and children who were benefiting from the programs she had put in place. Ben looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "You've given me something I never thought I'd have again," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "A chance to breathe." Olivia smiled softly, her heart full. "You've always had it within you, Ben. I just gave you the space to see it." In that moment, Olivia knew that her journey was far from over. The foundation, the center, the people she had helped, none of it was just about charity. It was about connection, about building a community of support where no one was ever left to carry their burdens alone. And for the first time in a long time, Olivia felt at peace. She had found her true purpose, not in the wealth and power that had once defined her, but in the quiet, unspoken moments where people reached out to one another, not for handouts, but for real, meaningful change. Her empire, once built on the foundation of ambition and profit, was now fueled by something much more powerful: love, compassion, and a shared desire to make the world a better place, one person at a time. Olivia stood in the center of the newly constructed Ethan Foundation Rehabilitation Center, a quiet smile tugging at the corners of her lips. This place, now filled with the hum of activity, bustling parents, therapists, and children, was a far cry from the empty lot it once was. She had poured everything into it, not just her money and resources, but her heart and soul. The center was a testament to the transformation that had taken place within her own life, and it was, in many ways, a mirror of the journey she had traveled from the billionaire businesswoman who once saw life as a series of transactions to someone who now understood the value of human connection. Ben, for his part, had become a regular presence at the center, though not in the way he had imagined. At first, he had been reluctant to fully engage. The idea of asking for help had always been foreign to him. After all, he was the one who had always taken care of others. But as the days passed, he began to slowly ease into the space Olivia had created. He took part in the therapy sessions, attended support groups, and most importantly, allowed himself to step away from the overwhelming responsibility of caring for Ethan, even if just for a few hours at a time. His reluctance had faded, replaced by an unexpected sense of peace. He was learning to trust others, something he hadn't known he needed until Olivia had forced him to face it. There were days when Ben would walk through the door of the center with a weary look in his eyes, his shoulders slumped beneath the weight of his struggles. But there were other days when he carried a quiet strength, a glimmer of hope that hadn't been there before. It wasn't that he had solved all of his problems. The challenges of raising Ethan alone, the financial burdens, the constant worry about his son's future, they were still present, still a part of his reality. But now, Ben was learning that it was okay to have moments of vulnerability, to admit that he didn't have all the answers, and that he didn't have to shoulder everything by himself. And in that he found healing. Olivia watched Ben's transformation from a distance, her heart swelling with pride. She had always known he was strong, but what she hadn't realized was that his true strength lay not in his ability to protect and provide for Ethan at all costs, but in his ability to accept help when it was offered, and in his willingness to open himself to the idea that life didn't have to be a constant struggle. It wasn't just about being self-sufficient. It was about allowing the people around him to lift him up when he needed it most. The foundation flourished. Word spread, and more families in need began to take notice of the services Olivia had created. It was more than just a place to receive help. It was a sanctuary where people could breathe, reset, and reclaim their lives. The therapists, doctors, and social workers who volunteered their time were committed to not just treating the children, but also to caring for the parents, who had long been overlooked in the process. For too long, families like Ben's had been expected to carry the weight alone, to endure unimaginable hardships without any consideration for their own well-being. But now, Olivia had created a space where that was no longer the case. It was a place of healing, of community, of shared strength. And yet, even as the foundation thrived, Olivia found herself confronting new questions. Questions that had been buried deep within her, waiting for the right moment to surface. She had dedicated herself to the well-being of others, to helping people like Ben, but in doing so, she had neglected one crucial aspect of her own life: herself. She spent long hours at the center, but as the months wore on, she began to realize that she was still running from something. There was an emptiness within her, a feeling that despite her success, something was still missing. Her relationship with her parents had remained strained. The distance between them hadn't lessened, and the conversations, though polite, still felt hollow. She had built an empire, but at what cost? She had poured all of her energy into a cause that she believed in, but she had never taken the time to ask herself what she truly needed. It was during a late evening at the center, as the last of the families trickled out and the building began to quiet down, that Olivia found herself standing alone in the therapy room, looking out the window at the city below. The lights of the skyscrapers twinkled in the distance, and for a brief moment, she felt a pang of loneliness that she hadn't experienced in a long time. She had everything she had ever wanted in terms of success, but somehow, the life she had built still felt incomplete. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, breaking the silence. It was a message from Ben. He had sent her a photo of Ethan, laughing with a group of other children, his face lit up with joy. It was a reminder that the work they had done together had brought real change, that the foundation had given Ethan the chance to experience life in a way he hadn't before. Olivia stared at the picture for a long moment before replying, her fingers moving quickly across the screen. "I'm so happy for him, Ben. You've given him so much." The reply came a few moments later. "You've given us both more than we could have ever hoped for, Olivia. Thank you." She stared at the words, feeling a rush of warmth spread through her chest. It was moments like this, these small but significant gestures, that made her feel that her efforts were worth it. But there was still something inside her that didn't feel complete. She had made a difference in the lives of countless families, but now it was time for her to focus on herself. She couldn't help others if she wasn't taking care of herself. The next day, Olivia made a decision. She would step back from the foundation just for a little while. She would take a break from the constant demands of the center, from the endless meetings and phone calls, and give herself the space she needed to rediscover what was important to her. It was a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. She had built her identity around the work she had done, and now she had to find a way to redefine herself. Ben had told her that she couldn't pour from an empty cup, and now Olivia realized that she had been running on empty for far too long. She had spent so much time helping others that she had neglected to help herself. It was time to find the balance between giving and receiving, between caring for others and caring for herself. Over the next few weeks, Olivia took a step back from the foundation. She still remained involved, but she allowed herself to take more time for personal reflection. She took walks in the park, read books that weren't about business or philanthropy, and even spent a few evenings dining with friends, something she hadn't done in years. She found herself reconnecting with the things she had lost touch with: her love for art, her passion for literature, and the joy of simply being present in the moment. It wasn't an easy process. There were days when the guilt would creep in, reminding her of all the people who depended on her, all the work that still needed to be done. But she pushed those thoughts aside, reminding herself that true leadership came from a place of inner peace, not burnout. She couldn't continue to build an empire of change if she wasn't whole herself. Ben noticed the difference in her almost immediately. When they met for coffee one afternoon, he couldn't help but comment on how much lighter she seemed. "You're different," he said, his voice filled with curiosity. "You seem happier." Olivia smiled, taking a deep breath. "I'm learning to be, Ben. I'm learning that taking care of myself isn't selfish, it's necessary. And I'm starting to realize that I don't have to be everything to everyone. I can be something for myself, too." Ben nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You deserve it, Olivia. You've done so much for others. It's time you did something for yourself." As they sat in comfortable silence, sipping their coffee, Olivia realized that she had finally come full circle. The foundation, the center, the people she had helped, all of it had led her to this moment, where she could truly understand the importance of balance in her life. And in that balance, she had found the one thing that had eluded her for so long: peace. It was a new chapter, one she had never expected, but one she knew was necessary. And with it, she finally understood that while she had built an empire, the true measure of her success wasn't in the wealth or power she had accumulated, but in the lives she had touched, the hearts she had healed, and the journey she had taken to heal herself. The foundation she had built wasn't just for others, it was for her, too. A place of restoration, of connection, and of love.